Our next speaker is Anthony Hodge, who's the president of International Council on Mining and Metals, but as he said to me, that really doesn't do justice to his longstanding involvement in Arctic energy.
Thank you very, very much. Now, we are under very explicit and firm instructions not to thank President Grimson, so I won't do that. I do want to, however, offer one thanks that hasn't come up to this point. I want to thank the community of Reykjavik and the country of Iceland for opening its heart to this event. And the reason I say that is that's the ingredient that is required to take a very, very good event and making it really excellent by any standard across the world. Because head has to go with heart to achieve the kind of dream that was mentioned by the speaker from Singapore. Now, yesterday I came in from the airport and I learned that the government system in Iceland is the longest continuously operating parliamentary democracy in the world. It dates from 930 or close to that, 930 I think. And I was very, very intrigued by that. And I must tell you that by the time I got into my hotel, I had a wonderful cab driver, and by the time I got in, I was quite convinced that not only did he know everyone in Reykjavik, but probably had connection with and knew most people in all of Iceland. And I learned something from him that I have to invoke. I learned from him a principle, and it was a principle that was reaffirmed this morning earlier on, and I would call it almost an Icelandic proverb. And it's an Icelandic proverb that very much applies to me in this panel, because as I prepared my thinking to come here, I tried to get a hold of Charlie time and time again, and couldn't. I met him 5 minutes ago. And I would say to Charlie, what do you want me to talk about? I'm a mining guy. This is about Arctic energy. How do you want to fit that in? Finally, I met him 5 minutes ago. He said, well, Tony, you can say whatever you want. So now I'm going to invoke the Icelandic proverb that goes like this. When in doubt, borrow from your neighbors and invoke the Faroese circle dance. So I'm not going to talk to you about energy policy in a sense, but everything that I say is related to energy, it's related to the Arctic, and it's related to cooperation. I have 3 points to share with you. Number one, rules are not enough. They are not enough. Across the world, in my current assignment, I'm interacting with mining activities all over the world. Our organization brings together the 20 largest mining companies of the world. They report out on their performance against a series of principles in a third-party, independently assured reporting system every year. They play by the rules. And what we are seeing across the world is that they are still having to deal with very serious issues that lie between communities and mining companies. And I want to share some of that insight because it applies profoundly to going forward in the Arctic in a way that avoids that kind of tension. Second point, solutions that we need in the world, in fact, are at the periphery. They're not at the center. You could say that a little bit differently, and that is maybe the periphery should be thought of as the center. And in fact, looking at the map on Iceland Air coming up with Iceland in the center, there's a justification for that. The reason I say that to you is I lived for many, many years in northern Canada, and at one period of time served to be responsible for looking at benefits to development of the entire Yukon. This was at a time when energy issues had sprung upon, early 80s, energy issues had sprung across the world. We began looking at energy policy, and the concepts of energy policy that were very, very at forefront there 30 years ago are what now people are talking about today. The periphery faces real problems with real people under extreme conditions and must find practical solutions that the center only becomes aware of much, much later. I want to zero in on one aspect of that sort of thing. What do the chief executive officers of our companies, what keeps them up at night? What keeps them up at night is the breakdown in relationships between their companies and the communities in which they operate. Now, I sometimes speak to young mining engineers or engineering students, and we talk about this issue of relationships. And I say to them, now think about it. If you have a problem with your girlfriend, are you going to seek advice from your fellow engineers about how to fix your relationships with your wife? That's what happens every time. A little snicker right across the class. That's always what happens. And the fact of the matter is that the people who are skilled in the oil companies, in the mining companies, the technical skills that are desperately required to bring projects to life are oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, not the people that are skilled in relationship building. In fact, that defines a divide at our universities. People who are interested in human relationships are generally over in the arts. People who are interested in bean counting are not. And it's a fundamental issue that we have to deal with. Today, there is failure of capacity to create effective relationships at the highest levels. So the problem of capacity, and in developing countries, and I listen to people coming from Canada who are where I come from. Originally, I'm in London now, but in Canada. And I hear talk of working with developing countries to enhance capacity. I understand that that's needed in all sorts of fronts, but where is the failure of capacity right now? It's failure of relationship building. It's happening in Washington. Where is the failure of capacity to affect creative relationship building? It's happening in Syria. It's the leadership of our political system. And the reason that this meeting and the spirit of this meeting is so critical is that it is about dialogue. It is about collaboration. And from our mining companies all across the world, what we are learning is that the ones that are learning how to do it well have figured out that it is relationship with authenticity, with integrity, and with respect that makes a difference. And that's not an intellectual concept. It comes from the heart. So that's my final point. Related to that, there's one other point that I would make before stopping, and I hope there are some questions, and that is that in spite of everything that we talk about, different sides of the equation, I think we have to work very hard together to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There have certainly been issues and are ongoing issues related to mining, related to oil development in the world today. You're all aware of it. But you know, this facility wouldn't be possible without those activities. The opportunity to reduce poverty, to continue the reduction of poverty in many countries is hinged on the capacity for them to extract and for them to use the natural resources in a way that is consistent with their values. Not just somebody else's values, but consistent with their values. This is a values issue, and it is only through this dialogue, this kind of dialogue, that we can ensure that there is synchronicity in those values moving forward. Thank you.